They told me I wasn't their daughter anymore, that I was just a mouth with legs, too slow to serve, too loud to love. One night, I was thrown out with nothing but a bruised arm, a crumpled dollar, and no shoes. But what they didn't know, that's the night I started becoming someone they could never erase. So if you've ever felt like the people who should have loved you the most were the first to abandon you, stay. Because this story, it's not about revenge, it's about resurrection. And it starts with a broken plate and a whisper that changed everything. At 42, Ava had learned how to fold her silence like napkins, neat, invisible, and placed exactly where no one would trip over it. She lived in the same beige house she grew up in, though it hadn't felt like hers in decades. The wallpaper peeled. The air always carried the faint smell of must and meatloaf, and yet the real rot clung to how Claudine and Rick looked at her, like a leftover chore, like something they forgot to throw out. Dinner was always the performance. Ava set the table at 5:45 sharp. Forks to the left, knife to the right, napkins folded like origami leaves. It was the only time she could almost imagine she belonged there, that maybe if everything looked perfect, no one would raise their voice. Maybe tonight, Rick wouldn't call her lazy. Maybe tonight, Claudine would look her in the eyes. But then came Leo, Rick's son from a previous marriage. 8 years old, all demands and entitlement, feet swinging under the table like he was king of something. He didn't say hello, he didn't look at Ava, just barked, "Milk, warm, now." Ava moved quietly to the stove, heating a small saucepan with a splash of milk, watching it bubble slowly as the heat coiled through the silence. She poured it carefully into his cup and placed it gently on the table. Leo took one sip, frowned, then spat it back into the cup. "Too hot," he whined. Rick grunted from his seat. "She never gets it right. You treat him like a guest, Ava. He's family." Ava said nothing. She picked up the cup, ran cold water over the bottom, and placed it down again. Claudine across the table scrolled on her phone. "You know he likes it just warm enough, Ava. Don't make him upset." Ava clenched her jaw. "He didn't even say please." Rick's chair scraped loudly as he stood. Ava froze. The leather belt buckle glinted under the overhead light. "What did you just say?" She steadied herself, keeping her voice even. "He didn't say please. That's all." Rick moved fast. He always did when he was angry. One moment, Ava was standing by the chair. The next, pain exploded across her upper arm. The belt cracked like a whip, tearing through fabric and skin. Leo laughed. Claudine didn't look up from her phone. "Enough!" Ava shouted, stumbling back, hand gripping her throbbing shoulder. "Mom, did you see that?" Finally, Claudine looked up, not with concern, with annoyance, like someone had interrupted her show. Rick," she said mildly, "maybe don't leave marks where it shows." Ava's breath caught. Her mother, the woman who'd once tucked her into bed after nightmares, now acting like she was the inconvenience. "I said," Ava's voice shook, "did you see what he did to me?" Claudine's eyes locked on hers, then, slow and sharp. She set her phone down gently and stood, walked over until they were almost nose to nose. "You really want an answer, Ava?" she said, voice low. "Fine, I heard you, I see you, but let's be clear. And you're not my daughter anymore." Ava blinked. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Rick stood at the table, smug, arms folded. Leo was humming, dipping his spoon in mashed potatoes, like this was the best show in town. She stared at her mother. "You don't mean that?" Claudine smiled, tight, cold, mechanical. "I mean every word. Now clean up your mess and bring Leo another spoon." He dropped his. Ava didn't remember reaching the front door. 1 minute she was staring at her mother's face, the woman who'd just disowned her without a flicker of regret. And the next she was shoved through the threshold, the porch light humming above her like an indifferent witness. The door slammed behind her. She heard the deadbolt slide into place, bare feet on cold concrete. The air had turned sharp. Her arm throbbed where the belt had landed, skin hot and torn beneath her sleeve. She blinked into the night, dazed. The silence out here felt different, too big, too final. She turned, pounded on the door. "Mum," her voice cracked, "let me at least grab my stuff. My toothbrush, please." Footsteps approached from the other side. For a moment she thought Claudine might open the door. Instead, her voice sliced through the wood. "You don't need to brush the mouth that spits at your family." Ava froze, her hand dropped. The porch light flickered once, then stayed on, casting a yellow halo around her figure like a target. $1. That's what she had, crumpled in the pocket of her hoodie. No shoes, no coat, just a hoodie, a bruised arm, and a mother who now saw her as disposable. She stepped off the porch like she was stepping off a cliff. The driveway was rough beneath her feet. Every pebble, every crack in the sidewalk stabbed up through her soles like the world itself was warning her, "Don't come back." The neighbourhood was quiet, too quiet. No one looked out their windows. No one asked if she was okay. Maybe they never had. She passed a row of houses with porch swings and wind chimes. The kind of homes that looked warm on the inside, but none of them were for her. On the third block, her legs gave out. She sat down on the curb, hugging her knees to her chest, the pavement biting into her skin. She could still feel the belt, still hear Leo's laugh, still see the moment Claudine chose silence over daughterhood. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. But she didn't let them fall. Not yet. People walked past. A jogger with earbuds. A couple arguing quietly. No one stopped. She must have looked like she belonged there, just another middle-aged woman down on her luck. But Ava knew better. She wasn't broken because life had been hard. She was broken because the people who should have loved her didn't even see her as human anymore. An old man on a bicycle slowed down, looked at her, then shook his head and kept riding. The shame started to curl up her spine, cold and acidic. That's when it hit her, the bitter irony. She was free now, free from the house where silence had more weight than screams, free from Rick's belt, free from Claudine's calculated cruelty. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like falling through glass. Still, something inside her stirred, a whisper, maybe even a dare. "You're not dead, not yet." The wind picked up. She pulled the hood over her head and stood, legs trembling. Each step forward felt like learning to walk all over again, barefoot, in a world that had never made space for her. No one noticed when she turned the corner and disappeared into the night. And for the first time, Ava wondered if she made it out of this, who would she become? Ava found herself outside a gas station on the edge of town just past midnight. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were irritated to be left on this long. She'd curled up on the far corner bench, knees tucked beneath her hoodie, head resting against the cold metal wall. Her bare feet stung from the cracked sidewalk. Her stomach growled loud enough to startle a stray cat nearby. Sleep came in shivers, not dreams. She drifted in and out, the concrete beneath her barely warmer than the air around her. Somewhere deep in the night, laughter erupted. A group of teenagers, too loud and too careless, approached the station. "Yo, look at Grandma sleeping on the curb," one shouted. Ava didn't move. She didn't even flinch. Maybe if she stayed still, they'd leave. Another voice laughed. "You want a drink, Grandma?" A splash. Something cold and sticky hit her chest. She gasped, sitting up abruptly, the wet soaked through her hoodie, chilling her to the bone. The teens roared with laughter and sprinted off, their voices echoing down the empty street. She sat frozen for a second, then slowly wiped the front of her sweatshirt with her sleeve. The soda, flat and sweet, clung to the fabric, thick and humiliating. She didn't cry. She didn't even get angry. There wasn't enough strength left for that. Pushing herself to her feet, she staggered toward the gas station's restroom. The man behind the counter didn't look up. He didn't have to. He'd seen people like her before. "Bathrooms are for paying customers," he muttered without lifting his gaze. I have $1, she replied, voice hoarse. He finally looked up, shrugged. "Then buy something. Water's in the back." She walked past shelves filled with things she couldn't afford. Chips, crackers, soap, candy. At the end, she found the bottled water, picked the cheapest one, and carried it to the counter. 89 cents, he said. She handed over her last $1. He didn't offer a bag. She didn't ask for one. Outside, the restroom was dimly lit, with a cracked mirror above a rust-stained sink. Ava stood under the flickering light, gripping the edge of the basin like it might hold her up. She looked into the mirror. What stared back wasn't her. Or not the her she used to know. One eye was puffy and beginning to bruise. There was dried blood near her temple. Her hair was matted to one side. Her arm, already turning a sickly purple from the belt, throbbed with every breath. But it was her eyes that unsettled her the most. They looked vacant, like someone had erased her from the inside out. She splashed cold water on her face, watching the blood swirl down the drain. Then she looked back up and noticed it, a torn piece of paper barely clinging to the edge of the mirror, taped haphazardly. The ink was faded but still legible. "If you need help, come to Grace Shelter, 8th Street. Her heart stuttered. For a second she thought it might be a prank. But the handwriting was soft, almost hesitant. A message left by someone who'd once stood where she stood now. She read it 3 times. Grace Shelter, 8th Street, a direction, a thread, a breath. She didn't know if she could trust it, but it was more than she'd had in days. She gripped the paper gently, just enough to tear it off the mirror, folded it twice, and slipped it into her pocket beside the empty water bottle. As she stepped back into the streetlight's buzz, the city felt a fraction less hostile. Maybe tomorrow she'd find 8th Street. Maybe tomorrow she'd find something more than concrete and silence. The next morning, Ava walked the 6 blocks to 8th Street, with the ache of exhaustion grinding through her bones. Her feet were raw, her legs trembling from the cold and lack of sleep. When she finally saw the weathered brick building with the words Grace Shelter painted in fading blue above the door, something in her chest cracked. Not from pain, but from the fragile thread of hope that she might have found somewhere that didn't want to erase her. The lobby smelled like coffee and disinfectant. A woman at the desk glanced up, her eyes taking Ava in all at once. Bare feet, bruises, matted hair. She didn't flinch. "You looking for intake?" the woman asked. Ava nodded. Her voice was gone. The woman gave a soft, professional smile. "Name's Marla. I'll get the paperwork." She returned with a clipboard and a pen. Ava filled in the blanks slowly. Name, Ava Lorraine. Age, 42. Emergency contact, none. Last residence, unknown. Marla scanned it, then typed something into the computer. Her expression shifted subtly, eyebrows knit, lips pressed tight. She clicked a few more times, then sighed. "I need to be transparent with you," Marla said, lowering her voice. "We received a flag on your file from CPS." Ava blinked. "CPS?" Child Protective Services. There was a report. It says you posed a potential threat to minors, allegedly unstable, possibly violent. Ava's breath caught. Her stomach twisted. That's not true, she said quietly. Marla didn't argue, but the pause that followed was enough. Ava saw the doubt behind her professionalism. There's nothing in the system about any injuries, Marla added gently. No mention of being thrown out, just that you left after an altercation. Ava closed her eyes. Her mother. It had to be her. Claudine had always been careful, manipulative. Ava should have seen it coming, the erasure on paper, the reframing of truth into something bureaucratically damning. She didn't just throw Ava out physically. She'd made sure the world wouldn't take her in either. I didn't hurt anyone, Ava whispered. I just didn't want to serve her stepson like a maid. Marla's face softened, but her hand stayed on the folder. I believe you, but the shelter's policy is strict when it comes to flagged files. We'll need to place you in observational intake just for 72 hours. Ava nodded. She didn't have the strength to argue. Marla led her to a small cot in a shared room. No sheets, no privacy, but it was inside. It was warm. That was enough. Hours passed. Ava lay still, watching sunlight crawl across the tiled floor, wondering how many other women had come through here erased, renamed, repackaged by the lies of people who were supposed to love them. That evening, she sat in the cafeteria, pushing a biscuit around her tray, unable to eat. Mind if I sit? The voice was gravelly but kind. Ava looked up to see an older black man in a navy coat, his face lined like folded paper. He carried a paper bag and a rolled-up blanket. She nodded once. He sat without ceremony, opened the bag, and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He broke it in half and offered her a piece. I'm Elijah, he said. You look like someone who hasn't been asked her name in a while. Ava stared at the sandwich. Her stomach growled before she could answer. I'm not going to push, he said, setting it down beside her. But food tastes better when you don't eat it alone. She picked it up. It was dry turkey on white bread. But it was warm. It was something. I'm Ava, she said finally. Elijah smiled. Good. Now I know who I'm praying for tonight. And just like that, the silence didn't feel so sharp anymore. The next morning, Elijah waited for Ava outside the shelter. He held 2 paper cups, one steaming, the other wrapped in a napkin. Coffee in silence, he said, handing her one. Pick whichever you need more. She chose the coffee. They didn't talk much on the way. The streets were just beginning to stir, the sun still stretching behind cracked rooftops. They turned down a quiet side road until Elijah stopped in front of a narrow storefront with fogged windows and a wooden sign carved with the words Cedar Clay Studio. It didn't look like much, just a square space tucked between an abandoned tax office and a laundromat. But when Elijah pushed open the door, the scent of wet earth and something faintly sweet rolled out, wrapping around Ava like a wool blanket. Inside, shelves lined the walls, stacked with half-formed bowls, misshapen mugs, vases with uneven rims. A long table stretched through the centre, its surface covered in drying clay and scattered tools. It wasn't pretty. It was honest. A woman stood near the back, hair silver and twisted into a low knot, apron stained with streaks of glaze. She was scraping dried clay from a wooden slab, but when they entered, she didn't smile, didn't speak. She simply looked at Ava with eyes like still water, quiet, deep, unblinking. This is Evelyn, Elijah said. She's the boss, but don't let that scare you. I'm not scared, Ava replied. Her voice surprised even her. Evelyn nodded once. Good, Clay doesn't like fear. Sit. Ava hesitated, then walked toward one of the stools. It wobbled slightly beneath her as she sat. Evelyn placed a block of clay in front of her, wrapped in damp muslin. She peeled it back, like revealing something sacred. "Touch it," Evelyn said. Ava looked at her hands, still bruised, knuckles cracked. Then she pressed her palms into the clay. It was cool, soft, but not weak. It gave beneath her fingers, but pushed back too. She tried to knead it, but her right arm ached from the bruises. Her grip slipped. The lump rolled off balance and collapsed in on itself. She stared at it. Something inside her tightened. "Try again," Evelyn said. Ava did. This time she pressed harder, trying to shape it into something, anything, but all she made was a mess, a broken spiral, a slumped lump. Her breaths came faster, her chest clenched. "I can't," she said. "It's useless." Evelyn stepped closer, looked down at the wrecked clay, then at Ava. "So?" she said. Ava blinked. "So it's ruined." Evelyn shrugged. "Then it remembers. Clay holds the pressure you put into it, every twist, every mistake, but it also forgives." Ava frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means if you let it, it'll become something new, but only if you're honest with it." For a moment, Ava didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She looked at the clay again, still ugly, still broken, but no longer mocking. She pressed her fingers into it once more, this time slower, gentler. Behind her, Elijah settled onto a stool and began shaping something of his own. Evelyn returned to her scraping. No one said another word. And for the first time in a long time, Ava didn't feel watched or judged or erased. She felt possible. Over the next week, Ava returned to Cedar Clay every morning like it was a secret she didn't want to lose. The bruises on her arm had begun to fade, but the stiffness remained. Still, she showed up, slipped her hands into the cool clay, and tried again. Her first bowl looked like a squashed mushroom. The rim wobbled, the base tilted. It couldn't hold soup without spilling its story. But Evelyn didn't correct her. She only watched, silent and steady. "Should I start over?" Ava asked once, holding up the lopsided piece. Evelyn came over, tilted her head and said, "Why? It's honest." That day, Ava stayed late. When the studio emptied and only the hum of the small heater filled the air, she pulled the misshapen bowl closer. Her fingers, trembling slightly, took a wooden stylus and etched 3 small words along the inner rim. "Still here." She didn't know why she wrote it. Only that the words had lived in her chest for too long without a home. The next morning she returned to find the bowl fired, glazed in soft grey and placed neatly on a shelf near the front. She stood staring at it for a while, unsure whether to feel proud or embarrassed. Evelyn approached and stood beside her. "Not bad," she said, arms folded. "Bit ugly, but so are most truths." Ava chuckled, surprised at herself. Evelyn reached into her apron and pulled out a small laminated card. She held it out. Ava blinked. Printed in simple black letters, "Ava Lorraine, Assistant Clay Technician, Cedar Clay Studio." Ava didn't take it right away. I haven't even made anything decent yet," Evelyn shrugged. "We're not hiring talent. We're hiring survivors." Ava stared at her. "Why me?" "Because you come back," Evelyn said. "Because your hands shake, but they still shape. Because you understand that broken isn't the opposite of whole. Sometimes it's the beginning." Ava took the card, carefully folding it in half like something fragile. No applause followed, no dramatic moment, just a quiet, grounding shift. For the first time in years, Ava felt tethered to something that didn't ask her to prove she deserved to exist. The studio became her rhythm. In the mornings, she shaped. In the afternoons, She helped organise tools, clean glaze buckets, and stack bisqueware. At night, she walked back to the shelter, clay dust still under her nails. She didn't have a home, not yet. But she had a shelf where her work lived, a label with her name, a place where no one yelled faster or smile or why can't you just be easier? At Cedar Clay, her mistakes stayed on the wheel, not in her body. And every time she looked at that little crooked bowl with "still here" scratched into its skin, Ava remembered something Evelyn had once whispered when the kiln cracked a vase in two. Sometimes the fire just reveals what the shape was always meant to be. The front bell chimed, a sharp jingle that cut through the low hum of the studio. Ava glanced up from her wheel, hands slick with wet clay, elbows coated in dried slip. She expected Elijah or maybe a student coming in for the afternoon class, but it was her mother. Claudine stood just inside the doorway, framed by sunlight that made her hair look like steel and her eyes colder than Ava remembered. She wore a pressed cream coat and clutched her purse tight, like stepping into this space might somehow dirty her. Ava froze. Evelyn looked up from the back table, eyes narrowing slightly, but she said nothing. She wiped her hands calmly on a rag and moved to a nearby shelf, giving Ava a wide but protective berth. Claudine's gaze swept the studio. Unfinished pieces, the dust in the corners, the organised chaos of a working space, and wrinkled her nose. "I heard you were here," she said, her voice unnaturally light. "Thought it was time we talked." Ava stood slowly. Her knees ached from hours at the wheel. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't wipe them clean. "Why?" she asked flat. Claudine took a step forward, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Because I'm your mother, and this little rebellion has gone on long enough." Ava didn't reply. Her palms stayed pressed against the clay. Claudine sighed. "I know things were said, feelings were hurt, but family is family, Ava. We need you home." Ava raised one eyebrow. "Home?" "Yes. Rick's been stressed. Leo's struggling in school. It's been hard without you there." Ava almost laughed. She'd been gone for months, thrown out, bruised, labelled a threat, and now they wanted her back like she was a misplaced appliance. Claudine continued. "You're strong, Ava. You've always been so capable, but we can't keep fighting. I came here to make peace." She sniffed delicately, eyes glistening. Ava knew that look, knew it too well, but her hands stayed on the clay. "You came," Ava said slowly, "because you need something. Not because I matter." Claudine's eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "No," Ava whispered. "What's not fair is that I bled on your floor and you called it discipline. What's not fair is that you didn't just let him hurt me. You helped." Claudine looked around again, as if realising someone might be listening. She lowered her voice. "I didn't come here to fight. I came because I heard there's going to be an exhibit." Ava didn't answer. Claudine's lips parted in a soft smile, practised and brittle. "A little gallery showing, local news, a few donors maybe. It's impressive. I thought perhaps your family could be there, for support." There it was. The twist Ava had expected. She'd read enough novels to know when a ghost came back wearing perfume. "You don't want to be part of my story," Ava said. "You want to be near it now that it's being told." Claudine's face hardened. "You really think I'd come here just for that?" "Yes," Ava said simply. Evelyn stepped closer then, folding her arms across her chest, her gaze cool and unmoving. "Visitors don't linger unless they're working," she said gently but firmly. Claudine hesitated, her mask slipping just a little. "Think about it, Ava. We all make mistakes." Ava looked down at the spinning clay beneath her fingers, imperfect, messy, real. "Some mistakes don't get a second wheel," she replied. Claudine turned sharply and walked out, the bell jingling again. But Ava didn't flinch. This time, the ghost left empty-handed. Claudine came back the next day. This time, she waited outside the studio, her coat buttoned too tightly, her purse clutched like armour. Ava saw her through the glass but didn't flinch. She rinsed her hands, dried them slowly, then nodded toward Evelyn. "Let her in," she said, "but only for 10 minutes. Evelyn opened the door without a word and returned to the back, giving them space, but not privacy. The walls in cedar clay held truth too tightly for secrets. Claudine stepped in, her heels echoing on the concrete. She looked around, trying to appear impressed. "I wanted to apologise," she said softly. Ava didn't offer her a seat. "Then don't waste time." Claudine faltered, then straightened her shoulders. "I was wrong. I let things get out of hand. Rick, he's not the easiest man, but I did what I thought was right at the time." "You thought hitting a child was right?" Ava asked. "I thought order mattered," Claudine replied. "I thought discipline was love." "No," Ava said, voice hard. "You thought silence was easier. You watched him use his belt on me when I was 12 and said nothing. You told me to smile while I wiped my own blood off the kitchen floor." Claudine looked down. "I was scared." Ava took a slow step forward. "Of what? Of him? Or of me becoming someone you couldn't control?" Claudine didn't answer. "I remember every word you said," Ava continued. "Every time you called me ungrateful, dramatic, lazy. You said I wasn't worth the food I ate, that I should be grateful anyone kept me around." Claudine's eyes shimmered, not with guilt, but hesitation. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she said, "but maybe it's time." Ava narrowed her eyes. "Tell me what?" Claudine swallowed. "You're not my biological daughter." The words landed like a dropped vase, shattering everything and leaving the silence ringing louder than before. "What?" Ava whispered. Claudine looked away, fingers tightening around her purse strap. "You were Rick's idea, his past. I met him when you were just a baby. He said your mother couldn't handle you, said he needed help. I agreed to raise you, but I was never ready." Ava felt her knees weaken. The walls of the studio seemed to stretch and blur. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "I kept it quiet," Claudine said, "because he insisted. He said no one needed to know, that it would just confuse you. I didn't think it mattered." "It mattered," Ava breathed. All the scars, all the nights wondering why she felt like a guest in her own life. The cold dinners, the distance, the punishments, the indifference. She wasn't unwanted by accident. She was never wanted at all. Claudine stepped forward, reaching out as if to offer comfort. Ava flinched back, but she didn't cry, not from pain, not from shock. She felt something else, weightlessness. She looked at Claudine, this woman who had shaped so much of her fear, and saw not a mother, not even a villain, just a tired, small person who had clung to power through silence. "Thank you," Ava said quietly. Claudine blinked. "For what?" "For confirming what I've always felt. Now I know. I don't owe you anything." She turned toward the back of the studio. Her hands itched for clay, for silence, for creation. Claudine stood alone, unsure of what to do with the door closing behind her. And Ava? She didn't feel abandoned. She felt free. Ava stood in the back corner of the studio, staring at the lump of clay that would become her most personal work. The idea had come to her the night after Claudine's confession, shocking, brutal, freeing. She hadn't been able to sleep, but her fingers twitched with purpose. She didn't want to make another bowl or cup. She wanted to create something that bled and breathed and bore witness. She began sculpting the next morning. It started with a wing, not graceful or smooth, jagged, uneven, a cracked base that she didn't try to hide. She embedded pieces of broken copper wire into the fractures, remnants from old belt buckles Elijah had found at a junk shop. She bent them with pliers, pressing them into the clay where old scars used to pulse on her skin. Then came the second wing. This one was fuller, more symmetrical. It curled slightly upward, like it was catching the wind for the first time. Between the two wings she shaped a sliver of a back, arched in tension like a body mid-rise, not flight, not collapse, just becoming. She fused the whole piece together with red earthenware, burnished it in ash-grey glaze, and let the kiln carry the rest. When she removed it days later, still warm and humming, the piece trembled in her hands, not physically, but spiritually. It felt alive, like something had passed through her and landed in clay. The gallery agreed to feature it at the centre of the upcoming community exhibit, Reclaiming Form. A dozen local artists were included, but it was Ava's name that appeared first on the flyer. She didn't believe it at first, but then the opening night came. The space had been transformed. Warm lights, soft music, rows of pedestal stands catching the gleam of glazed stone and smoothed wood. People filed in, murmuring politely, wine glasses in hand, admiring the pieces. Ava stood off to the side, tucked between a pillar and a small collection of mugs. She wasn't ready to be seen, not yet. But her sculpture was. They placed it in the centre of the gallery under a circular spotlight. The label read, "The Reforged Wing, Ava Lorraine." No further explanation. She watched the crowd move past it. Some paused, some tilted their heads, then moved on, and then one woman stopped, late 50s, maybe older. Curly grey hair, a worn denim jacket over a pale yellow dress. She approached the sculpture slowly, like it might bruise under her gaze. Her eyes fixed on the uneven wing, on the copper wire lacing through its spine. Then she covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders began to shake. Ava felt her own throat tighten. She stepped forward, cautiously. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. The woman looked up, eyes shining. "Did you make this?" Ava nodded. "I've seen this in my dreams," the woman whispered. "Not the clay, the feeling, that brokenness stitched together. That's how I've always felt, but I never had the words. You gave it shape." Ava couldn't speak. She just stood there, absorbing it. Not praise, not admiration, recognition. That moment, the quiet echo of someone else finding themselves in her pain, felt more real than anything applause could offer. The woman reached out, didn't touch the sculpture, just hovered her hand close. "Thank you," she said. Ava exhaled, and for the first time since her hands first touched clay, she didn't feel like she was crafting to survive. She was crafting to connect. In the days leading up to the exhibit, Ava had no idea that Elijah and Evelyn were quietly orchestrating more than just logistics. They transformed the gallery with intention. Evelyn personally rearranged the lighting to cast soft glows on each piece Ava created, ensuring nothing was overlit or overlooked. Elijah spent 2 evenings polishing the glass displays, his hands careful, reverent. They never told her what they were planning. But the night of the event, when Ava walked in and saw her name featured on a banner above the entryway, Ava Lorraine reforged. She stopped breathing for a second. "I didn't agree to that," she whispered. Evelyn, standing at the front desk, smirked. "Good thing we didn't ask." Inside, soft jazz played beneath the hum of conversations. The scent of cinnamon from the bakery next door drifted through the vents. Dozens of people moved around the gallery, admiring the work, some pausing with mouths slightly parted when they reached Ava's central sculpture. Ava hovered in the background, unsure whether to flee or bow. Then Elijah sidled up beside her, straightening the lapels of her thrifted blazer. "You ever been celebrated before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Feels weird, huh?" "Like I stole something," she admitted. "You did," he said, eyes twinkling. "You stole your own story back." Before she could respond, a sharply dressed man approached them. He wore black-rimmed glasses, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, and a small name badge clipped to his lapel. "Excuse me," he said, holding out a hand. "Ms. Lorraine?" Ava nodded, cautious. "My name's Daniel Kessler. I'm a curator with the New York Collective for Modern Clay. I flew in for this event after seeing images of the reforged wing online." Her brain stumbled. How did you... "We monitor rising voices in thematic sculpture," he replied. "Your piece, it's raw, grounded, and profoundly narrative. I'd like to discuss including it in our touring exhibit. National Circuit, Chicago, Portland, DC, and if things align, London." Ava stared at him. He smiled kindly. "You wouldn't need to leave immediately. We can work out logistics. But we believe your story belongs in larger rooms." Larger rooms. The phrase struck something deep in her. Her instinct screamed to say no, that she wasn't ready, that she didn't deserve this. She mumbled, "I'm not sure I'm the right kind of artist." Evelyn had walked up quietly behind them. She placed a hand gently on Ava's back. "No one is born ready for freedom," she said softly. "We grow into it, one fracture at a time." Ava's hands trembled. All those years of being told she was nothing, of being background noise in her own life, and now someone wanted her work to echo across cities she'd never stepped foot in. She looked at Evelyn, then Elijah, and back at Daniel, and she said the bravest thing she'd ever said, "Let's talk." The conversation faded into the murmur of the room. But the shift inside Ava didn't. For the first time, she didn't feel like a woman patching over trauma with silence. She felt like someone who had cracked open and let the light in. The gallery was at full capacity. Journalists, artists, survivors, students. People had come not just for the art, but for the story, Ava's story. She stood in a corner near the back, fingers brushing the laminated name tag on her blouse. Her sculpture, the reforged wing, glowed beneath the central spotlight like a quiet declaration of war turned into peace. Then the room shifted. She felt it before she saw it, like a chill crawling through warm air. Heads turned, conversations faltered. The front door clicked shut behind two figures, Rick and Claudine. He wore his old polished boots and a stiff collared shirt. She wore pearls. They looked like they were attending a fundraiser, not a reckoning. Ava's pulse quickened, not from fear, from readiness. Rick walked straight toward her, hands clasped in that mock fatherly way he used when meeting strangers at church. "We've seen your work," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "and we just want you to know we forgive you." Ava blinked. "Forgive me?" "For the things you said," Claudine chimed in, "for how you left. Families go through rough patches, but we're still family." The crowd had begun to gather, subtle but attentive. Phones lifted, recorders flicked on. Ava didn't flinch. "You threw me out. I left barefoot with a broken arm." Rick chuckled gently, like she'd exaggerated a childhood memory. "Now, Ava..." She stepped forward, voice strong. "My name is Ava Lorraine Bennett. That's the name I was born with, the name I reclaimed after you tried to erase me. Rick's jaw twitched. Claudine's smile slipped slightly. You told people I was unstable, that I was a threat. You filed lies with CPS, buried me under paperwork while I slept outside a gas station with blood drying on my shirt. Rick raised his hands. Let's not turn this into drama. But Ava didn't stop. I told the truth through my hands because no one listened when I used my voice. I sculpted my bruises into clay. I built wings out of the metal you once hit me with. The crowd held its breath. Rick looked around, trying to control the narrative. She's clearly still emotional. We came here to make peace. A man near the front, an older artist Ava had never met, spoke up. That piece in the centre, that's not emotional, that's testimony. A woman beside him nodded. It moved me to tears. Someone else said, she doesn't owe you forgiveness. She gave us truth. Rick tried again. We raised her the best we could. No, Ava interrupted, voice rising. You raised me like a tool, and when I stopped being useful, you threw me away. Claudine's lips parted, but nothing came out. Ava turned to the crowd. You want to know what silence costs. It costs identity. It costs memory. It costs years of thinking your pain isn't real, because the people who caused it still smile at Sunday brunch. Rick started backing toward the exit, and Ava, she stood still. Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. She wasn't speaking to them anymore. She was speaking for every person who had been buried in silence and told that made them safe. A reporter stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, holding a small recorder and a pen poised over a notepad. Her voice was gentle but direct. Ms. Bennett, if I may ask, how much of this exhibit is autobiographical? Ava didn't hesitate. She met the woman's gaze, steady and unashamed. All of it. A hush swept through the room like a sudden gust. Ava continued, her voice quiet but sharp. Every sculpture, every crooked rim, every fractured wing, every warped base. It all came from the parts of me that were told they were ugly or unworthy. Nothing here was imagined. The silence stretched, not heavy, but sacred. And then, from the far left side of the room, a woman stood. She was in her late 40s, short hair, a pale green scarf wrapped twice around her neck. Her hands trembled slightly as she raised her voice. My mother used to hit me when I forgot to say thank you, she said. She called it discipline too. I spent 30 years thinking I was overreacting. Her voice cracked. But seeing your work tonight, it's like you sculpted my childhood into clay. Thank you for speaking what I couldn't. A few people gasped quietly. Then someone else murmured, me too. Another whispered, I thought it was just me. And then came the sound that Ava would never forget. Not thunderous applause, not a standing ovation. It was slow, deliberate clapping, real and reverent. One by one, the audience began to clap, not just for her art, but for her honesty, for their stories, for a room where silence no longer ruled. Claudine stood frozen, her eyes wide, jaw clenched. Her perfect posture seemed to crumble slightly under the weight of the moment. She turned without a word, heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots. Rick was already gone. Ava didn't watch them go like someone mourning a departure. She watched them the way one watches a fog lift from a field, knowing that what's revealed underneath is finally real. The applause faded slowly, but the energy remained, the kind of energy that only honesty can summon. Evelyn appeared beside her, a quiet presence grounding. You okay? She asked. Ava nodded. Yeah, I think I am. She turned back to the crowd, scanning the faces of people who had once been strangers, but now felt like mirrors. For the first time, she didn't see judgment or pity. She saw connection. Later, as the gallery emptied and the lights dimmed to a softer hue, Ava walked slowly to her sculpture. She ran her fingers along the edge of the broken wing. Her own scar made public. And then she whispered, "We're still here." No one else heard it, but the clay did. The quiet of her apartment greeted Ava like an old friend. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom space above a law office, the kind of place you rented by necessity, not desire. But it was hers. The floors creaked, the windows stuck in the corners, and the radiator hissed like it had opinions. But the silence here was different. It wasn't full of judgment or expectation. It let her breathe. She dropped her keys in the chipped bowl by the door, the first piece she ever made at Cedar Clay. Still wobbly, still uneven, but still here. She stepped into the main room and stared at the narrow wall between the kitchen and the window. There, mounted carefully on a reclaimed plank of barnwood, were 3 pieces. The cracked angel wing, fused with copper and clay, stood in the centre. To its left, the small bowl she'd once carved, still here into with trembling hands. And to the right, a new piece, a phoenix rising, its wings sculpted from old belt buckles, glazed brass and twisted wire, burnt but not broken. She adjusted the wing slightly so it faced the morning light, then sat. The air smelled faintly of coffee grounds and eucalyptus from the candle Evelyn had given her after the exhibit. She brewed a fresh cup, rinsed out her mug, and watered the tiny potted rose that sat in the window. It had bloomed once since she moved in, just once, but that was enough. Her phone buzzed, but she ignored it. Instead, she went to the mailbox in the hallway, more out of habit than necessity. Inside was the usual, a bill, a grocery flyer, and a cream envelope with no return address. Her name was written in delicate cursive she recognised instantly. Claudine. Ava stood there for a long moment, fingers resting on the paper. Back inside, she sat by the window, letting the late afternoon sun warm her knees through the glass. The envelope lay untouched on the table for nearly an hour before she finally opened it. Just one piece of paper. One sentence. "If you ever want to call, I'll be waiting. Mom." No explanation, no apology, no mention of the gallery. Just a thread dangled in the void, like a fishhook baited with nostalgia. Ava read it twice, then folded the letter carefully, not angrily, not tearfully, just gently. She slipped it into the back of her sketchbook and closed the cover. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't feel guilt. The letter wasn't closure. It was a question. And Ava didn't owe an answer. Outside, someone walked a dog across the street. A car honked softly in the distance. The wind rustled the window, just enough to make the phoenix sculpture shimmer. Ava sipped her coffee and looked at her wall of scars made sacred. She wasn't healed, but she wasn't hiding either. And for now, that was enough. The invitation came 2 weeks after the exhibit closed. It wasn't formal. No embossed letterhead, no flowery language, just a handwritten note left on her workbench at Cedar Clay. "Ava, we'd like you to install your phoenix on the main wall. It belongs to all of us now. Evelyn." She stared at the note for a long time. That wall, the front-facing panel beside the gallery window, was sacred in studio tradition. Only the most meaningful pieces went there, usually those created by teachers or resident artists. To be asked to place her work there was more than a compliment. It was a rite of passage. That Sunday, under soft winter light, Ava returned to the studio carrying her phoenix sculpture. She'd reinforced it since the exhibit, embedding extra clay around the brass to stabilise its frame. She polished the copper wires, made sure every seam told its truth without apology. Elijah helped her hoist it up while Evelyn measured and levelled. It took 20 silent minutes to get it right, centred, balanced, lit from above. When it was done, they stepped back. The phoenix glowed against the whitewashed wall, its wings outstretched, uneven, beautiful. Twisted bits of old belt buckles shimmered beneath the glaze like bones made holy. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be. It was proof. Beneath it, Evelyn screwed in a small plaque that read, "Rising Unbroken, Ava Lorraine Bennett." Later that afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the high windows, a small group came through the gallery for a community open house. Locals, families, a few kids. Ava stayed in the back, watching quietly. Then a voice rose, small but clear. "Mom," a little girl said, tugging her mother's sleeve, "look at her wings." The mother leaned down. "That's a phoenix, sweetheart. It means rising again after you fall." The girl, maybe 10 years old, studied the sculpture intently. Her eyes scanned the burns in the clay, the warped lines, the coiled metal scars. "She's not perfect," the girl whispered. "No," her mother agreed softly. "She's strong." The girl squared her shoulders. "I won't let them crush me either. Just like her." Ava inhaled sharply, her eyes stinging. She didn't step forward, didn't interrupt. The moment wasn't hers to claim, but it filled her anyway. The fire she'd carried all these years, the one they tried to beat down, smother shame, had lit another spark. Not with a speech, not with a scream, just with clay and wire and quiet survival. And that was enough. She looked at her sculpture one more time, now standing guard over the space that had saved her. No longer broken, no longer buried, just burning, steady, eternal.